Would you like to defeat the enemy without having to get your hands dirty or your hair all messed up? Well, you're in luck. Because behind today's secret door, the Glamour Bard test drive. So behind today's Secret Door, the Glamour Bard test drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. Before I get started, let me just point out I have started a Patreon. If you would like to support the channel, the help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It's your chance to see how a character will play. Because you shouldn't have to commit to playing a character based on what you can get from what you're reading in the rules or what you might be getting from an online guide or a build or what have you. Practical play can be a little bit different. A test drive is your chance to see how the character will stack up and how it will play. So it's kind of buildish and it's kind of guide-ish. It's a test drive. I'll be taking you from levels 1 through 14. This should be pretty quick because it's not a terribly complicated class, but it's an incredibly powerful class. And I'll talk very briefly about role-playing considerations first. So when the Glamour Bard first came out years ago in Xanathar's, I was stunned. I looked at it and thought, this is one of the most powerful classes in the game. I am still of that opinion. But we'll get into just why when we get into the level by level. Let's talk just a little bit just briefly about a bard, because this one, its style is a bit different than what you might think of with a normal bard. And I think you should embrace that difference as much as you possibly can. Bards stereotypically are musicians of some sort or another, but they don't always have to be, I'm saying stereotypically. I would advise you to not be stereotypical with this bard. One of the big powers the bard gets only works if you sing, dance, or recite poetry. It's very clear that it has to be one of those three things. Now, your DM may be fine with whatever, but according to rules written, it has to be one of those three things. So I would embrace picking one of those three things: singing, dancing, or reciting poetry. Now, singing doesn't mean that you couldn't be playing an instrument while you're singing, of course, so you certainly could do that. But because the Glamour Bard is steeped in the idea of being something fey, and the image that always comes to mind whenever I think about the Glamour Bard is if you go back to the Lord of the Rings movies and you see the Lady of Lothlorien, and when she's talking to Frodo and she takes on that grim aspect of what she would look like, what she might look like, I should say, if she were to have the One Ring. She's beautiful and she's terrifying, and that's just how I see the Glamour Bard. So to me, the idea of being an orator of some sort is how I would play it. And like I said, very briefly, here is my big tip on role-playing, at least how I would approach it. I would embrace the idea, because you are, the power of the spoken word is, you see it in movies or in books all the time, that the character that can say that one right thing, that line will stick with you. That's the kind of thing that a bard should be doing pretty regularly. Now, that's really hard to pull off at the table. So what I would think about doing, if I were wanting to play an orator like that, is I might squirrel away. I just start looking online. If you're not well versed in poetry, I would squirrel away lines here and there from poetry. Now, that's the tricky part about playing bards, is that everybody always wants to put the bard in that situation where the player has to sing. I almost have never seen a player playing a bard where somewhere a player or a DM didn't want to put the player to that kind of a test. And that's, of course, absurd. But wouldn't it be great if you could pass that test? If someone challenged you as a bard and you had a ready line of verse ready for them, it might be worth it. Now, I'm not saying always do it, and I'm not saying that you have to go memorize countless lines of verse, but just have a few here squirreled away, some old chestnuts that could apply to a lot of situations, and it would be very effective. Again, this is entirely just something stupid that I would do. I'm not saying that you need to do it, but it would be a fun way of integrating the aspect of the bard into actual play at the table. But regardless of how you actually play the bard in terms of role-playing, this bard is very much a leader type of character. It is a controller. It is arguably one of the best controllers in the game. It could be the best controller in the game. Now, the Undead Warlock, I think, is the best round-to-round controller because they have the aspect of dread available to them at all times, and then you combine that with Repelling Blast, and you've got something that can neutralize a key combatant out of a combat every single round that the Warlock is on the table. The Glamour Bard can kind of do that too, not to the extent, but it also has a deeper spell array than the Warlock does. And it has one other key ability, which we will see. Its first ability, its best ability, comes right away at level 3. And that allows you to not necessarily control the battlefield in terms of the enemy. It allows your party to have control in a way that no other character in D&D really can do. So in that sense, how can this not be a leader character? It's a charisma character, and you are enabling the party to do things that it would not be able to do without you. But that being said, this is a character that is not predicated on dealing damage. I'm not even going to quote damage in round by round, in a level by level situation here, because the damage is virtually irrelevant. Your cantrip of choice is going to be Vicious Mockery. That does very, very little damage, and it's not even worth talking about. It's going to be pathetic. You're not doing it for the damage, you're doing it for the control. But the control this character can exert, both on the enemy, as I said, and its influence and its ability to defend characters and put them in the best possible positions all the time, is staggering. So for this test drive, I'm going to take us as custom lineage. We're going to obviously put the 15 into charisma, and we're going to put the +2 into charisma, of course, and we're going to take Fey Touched. Now, that's not only thematic for this character, but it's obviously a great feat, and we're going to put that +1 into charisma. For the spell, we're going to take Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and of course, we're going to get Misty Step. I would say dump both intelligence and strength. We don't really need them. And buy 2 14s in con and dex, and take a 12 in wisdom. Now, in Adventurers League, if you don't have a background feat, you are allowed to pick one of 3 other feats: skilled, tough, or magic initiate. For the sake of this, I'm going to say take magic initiate and go ahead and take find familiar. The cantrips I'm not worried about. Anything like Mage Hand, Minor Illusion, a lot of these are going to also be on the Bard list. You don't need to worry about combat ones, so take the fun ones. Even Message is a great choice. Message is incredibly useful. Now, at first level, we get spell casting and we get Bardic Inspiration. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time discussing Bardic Inspiration because you're only going to be using it in the traditional way at levels 1 and 2. But it's a d6, and it takes a bonus action to use it, and you give it to a party member, and it allows them to use that for an attack, etc., etc. Like I said, levels 1 and 2 is all you'll be using it for, and you should definitely use it at levels 1 and 2, but that's not what we're going to be using Bardic Inspiration for. We also get Ritual Casting, which is nice. We get proficiency in light armor. We get proficiency in an assortment of weapons that I'm not too worried about. However, if you were to encounter a weapon that might be in some other way useful to you, other than martially, I would suggest obviously taking it, because if you're proficient with it, why not? So at first level, the spells we want to take are Sleep and either Healing Word or Cure Wounds. Healing Word is going to be the more flexible one, but it is a bonus action spell, and as we'll see as this character progresses, your bonus actions are actually not really available to you. So as convenient as it would be to take Healing Word, I would actually go for Cure Wounds, and it's really only there for emergencies. I would also take Comprehend Languages because it's a ritual. And for the cantrips, I would take Vicious Mockery in either Mage Hand or Minor Illusion. It's really your choice. So playing at first level with the Bard, you're obviously with Sleep at levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and its effectiveness begins to scale down level by level. It's king. Levels 1, it's a wipeout spell. 2, it's a wipeout spell. 3 becomes a bit more dicey. 4 becomes even dicier still. And by level 5, it's generally trailed off. I have also done a video on how to upcast Sleep for free, and the link for that will be in the description as well. There are ways to make Sleep more effective without it actually having to upcast it yourself. But so therefore, things should go swimmingly for you as you're going to feel very, very powerful with Sleep in hand, and you get a free casting of Tasha's as well. So it's going to be supremely effective. That'll be good for any first level boss for sure. Now at level 2, we get Jack of all trades, and Jack of all trades is really interesting because it gives us a bonus to half of our proficiency bonus to any skill or ability check. That's the key point here. Ability check that we are not proficient with. Initiative is an ability check. So right out of the gate here at level 2, we get a +1 to our initiative. So with Jack of all trades and with skills in general, when you compare what you're getting with the Bard, it's critical to view the Bard in this light and in how powerful the class is, because it can be a really underrated class. Not always, not all people's eyes, but I think generally speaking, it's pretty underrated. The spell list is, for the spells that really matter, and certainly for control, the Bard's got nearly all of them. All the ones that the Wizard has, and the Wizard is seen to be, and is, the best controller in D&D. The one spell that we don't get, and we won't really ever be able to have access to, per se, is Web at level 3. Web at the 3rd character level. Web is an incredibly powerful control spell, and we get a great spell when we turn 3rd level, but it doesn't have near the kind of effective control. But that's really it. Wall of Force is not on the Bard spell list at level 5, and those 2 spells, and then Find Familiar, are the 3 spells that a Bard really wishes that it had. But of course, we are getting Find Familiar via Magic Initiate, and we're never going to get Web in this test drive, but we will get Wall of Force, even though it's not on the spell list. So looking at it from that perspective, if all we're down for why you would want to play a Wizard primarily, and you are getting light armor, and you're getting more skills, and you're going to get expertise and skills, and you're getting bardic inspiration, you're going to see how powerful that is at the next level. How much more powerful is the Wizard really than the Bard, or is it more powerful at all? If you were wanting to play a controller, I would argue that the Glamour Bard, from a control standpoint, is easily equal or better than Wizards are. As I said earlier, the only controller that I would put up in the same class as the Glamour Bard really is the Undead Warlock, because of its ability to but it's neutralizing fewer opponents, but it's just doing so on a repeat basis. It's extremely effective and extremely powerful, and it has a lot of combinations in it. This class does not have that kind of combination effectiveness. It's just brutally effective. We also get Song of Rest, which will add a d6 to healing during short rests. And we also get 3 spell slots now. So with the new spells known that you get here, take whatever you feel like from the first level spell list. You're just going to be trading it out as we move up along in levels. So at third level, we are now getting second level spells. We have 4 first level slots and 2 second level slots. As I said, Web is a bummer that it's not there, but we're going to take Aid. Now, Aid is one of those spells that does have great synergy with this character. It's a great spell by itself, but here at this level, you'll see that Aid has a great synergy for this character in particular, and it's also a great backup plan if everything should go completely horribly wrong and characters are dropping. Aid is a great pickup device for multiple characters. And we get expertise, so now our proficiency bonus is doubled in 2 skills. But of course, the big deal is now we get the College of Glamour. The first thing we get is our Bardic Inspiration use. So now instead of expending a dice, we expend a use of the Bardic Inspiration. And when we do, we get to pick a number of creatures of our choice that we can see equal to our Charisma bonus. That creature then gains 5 temporary hit points and can use its reaction to move up to its speed. Those temporary hit points will increase to 8 at level 5 and 11 at level 10, and to 14 at 15th level. Now, if this use of Bardic Inspiration only gave a number of party members equal to your Charisma modifier those temporary hit points, that would be plenty powerful in my opinion. But the fact that they can then use their reaction, move their speed, not incur opportunity attacks, is effectively giving that number of party members similarly to giving them Misty Step. That's insanely powerful. And what spell? There is no spell for mass Misty Step. It would be like having a spell that is giving mass Misty Step and mass False Life for the cost of a Bardic Inspiration, and you're not even using a spell, so you can still cast on the same turn that you use it. The use for the movement, obviously from a defensive standpoint, it's rather obvious. It's very, very effective. But it can also be used to reorganize the party to get into a more favorable position. And it can be used aggressively to allow the party to basically get past enemy lines, enemy defensive lines, and get to key targets. The ability to move and to pick your position is incredible, and with a Glamour Bard, the party will always be able to do it. Because you have a number of uses of your Bardic Inspiration per day, and I assume, and I'm not going to be talking a lot about combat here because this isn't a damage character, but I always assume you're going to face about 3 combats a day, and I always assume that you're going to have, each of those combats will last about 4 rounds. So on average, that would mean that the party will be engaged in about 12 rounds of combat in a day. Here at 3rd level, with 3 encounters, and you have currently of 4 uses of the Bardic Inspiration. That means you're going to be able to pull this off once in every encounter and twice in one of them. So you're getting the effect of a spell that I wouldn't even be able to calculate what level spell Mass Misty Step plus Mass False Life would be as a leveled spell. But you're getting the effect of that at 3rd level, and you get it to cast it 4 times a day. I mean, Misty Step, just you, is a 2nd level spell. Now, don't get hung up on me with the fact that I'm comparing it. I'm not directly comparing it to Misty Step in the sense that it's exactly the equal. It isn't. But its effect is basically, essentially the same. It doesn't have the utility effect that Misty Step has. You can't use this, for example, to get over a 30-foot chasm or get up to a rooftop or anything like that the teleportation will give you. But for the ways that you would use it in combat, it's essentially the same. It's a slightly less efficient Misty Step, if we'll put it that way. Now, this is what I mean in terms of control of the battlefield, because now by controlling your party, and you know what I mean, enabling your party to be effective, you are controlling the battlefield in that way. Now, it's both a good and a bad thing that you can't put the party where you would want them when they use their movement. It's a good thing because that would be incredibly tedious for the other players. But it's going to be tedious for you if you positionally wanted them in certain spots and the player decides to go someplace completely different, and players will do that. If you're of a mind that has a keen eye for positional strategy, invariably a player will just simply do something you don't expect them to do. And it could be better than what you thought. So there's that too. But sometimes players will just go off and do wacky things. Now, so here at level 3, if you were to use that Bardic Inspiration 4 times in a party where you're affecting 5, you would be dishing up, forget the movement, just in terms of raw temporary hit points in a day, you would be giving potentially 80 temporary hit points. And I say potentially because you could be using it perhaps in a way where party members already had the temporary hit points and hadn't lost them, and therefore, because temporary hit points don't stack, some of those uses invariably are going to not always be as effective. But you have the potential of giving 80 temporary hit points a day. This doesn't make your party invincible, but we're going to get to the point very quickly, in 2 levels in fact, where it's going to make your party so insanely hard to kill that when you combine the temporary hit points with that reaction movement and the ability to be more effective in combat, to be able to just get to different places or to get out of bad situations, combats will be over very quickly, and if they aren't over quickly, victory will become virtually a mathematical certainty. This power is, in my opinion, one of the very best powers any character has in D&D. And if that weren't enough, we also gain enthralling presence. So this is a performance. You have to be singing, dancing, or reciting a poem, as I had mentioned earlier. And when you perform for at least 1 minute, you choose targets that are within 60 feet of you that can see and hear, and they have to have seen and heard the whole minute. They have to make a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they are charmed by you. And if they are charmed by you, they idolize you. They will do anything they can to support you. They will not necessarily fight for you, but if they were inclined to do so before, they will. But they will do anything they can to hinder those who are trying to stop you, etc., etc. It's an insanely powerful thing that is extremely circumstantial. One of the more common circumstances, though, is in the case of if you have captives. And, of course, you have sleep. And check out the How to Upcast Sleep for Free video to see the details on how to do that. But you're going to have the opportunity to have captives. When you do, you could perform this. It only takes a minute. Just recite a good poem. They're captives. If they could be shutting their eyes, but they're not going to know. They don't know what's happening. But now that you have these captives and if you have charmed them, they're going to tell you whatever you want to know. They idolize you. So question away. If you're in the kind of situation where you're in a dungeon or you're in a castle or some kind of fortified position and you can do this, then you can have them go along with whatever plan that you can come up with. They are only going to be enthralled for that 1 hour. If they take damage, if they see you damaging their allies, however, that charm will break. So actually a very, very, very good power is just going to be circumstantial as to when you can use it. But you're getting that and you're getting the Bardic Inspiration ability. It's insanely powerful. And for second level spells now, I would say you definitely take Aid. I would trade one out to take Invisibility or Shatter or Suggestion. I'm mentioning Shatter simply because you don't have any form of offense. For a second level spell, it's actually fairly effective. It's not like mind-blowingly effective, but it's got a pretty decent area of effect, and it does a little bit of damage. You may just kind of get bored at certain points and want to contribute in some way to damage, so I mention it for that sake. But I would be of the mind to take Suggestion is a great spell, and obviously Invisibility is a great spell, so I would be inclined to take those two. But Aid is the must here. Now, Aid it's worth mentioning here at this point because we have both aid and the use of the Bardic Inspiration. Aid's going to raise the maximum hit point total of three targets. It's also not a concentration spell, so this lasts for 8 hours, so that's great as well. So it's raising their maximum hit points and it raises their current hit points by 5. This will stack with temporary hit points. But raising that maximum hit point total and having it stack with temporary hit points, which is something you're going to be doing every combat, is going to make it worthwhile to use it before combat. But obviously it's going to have its best value in use in picking up downed comrades. Now at 4th level, of course, we get the ASI. And here's where it becomes a bit of a trick. I'm going to say put the charisma to 20. But you could take alert. Now, you are a control caster. At level 5, we're going to get a big granddaddy control spell. Having alert, now you've already got Jack of all trades helping you, giving you a +1. You've got a +2 dex, so you've got a +3 to initiative, which is fine. It's not overwhelming or anything like that, but it's good. It's solid. Having an 8 would be fantastic. So the effect that would have on spells hitting the enemy as quickly as possible is obvious. I have us taking alert at level 8. Spoiler. But you could interpose them. So you could take alert now because we are ahead of the curve. But the effect that the charisma is going to give you is not only helping your save DCs, which is important, but it's also affecting your Bardic Inspiration in 2 ways. It's affecting the amount of times you can use it a day, and it's affecting the amount of targets you can affect. So if you have 5 potential other targets, now remember, this doesn't have to mean a party of 5 other characters. That could be familiars, etc., etc. But the real fun with alert is the fact that you are going to be going first or at the top of the order pretty routinely. When that happens, just thinking this through, not only is your control spell going off, but if you use your Bardic Inspiration, not just you are going first, so is the party. Not fully, not completely, but their reaction is going to allow them to get into the optimal position as soon as humanly possible at the earliest possible stage in combat. That's an unbelievable advantage for the party. I'm only suggesting that we take the 20 for charisma because it's mechanically the more reliable choice. At different tables, I would take alert like that. So it just depends on how effective your party is in utilizing this reaction and getting into the right positions. But I cannot overstate how powerful the Bardic Inspiration is and how useful that will be, whether you get alert now or you get alert at level 8, how effective it potentially can be to having you go and that basically the party go with you in the same round. The same initiative count is insanely useful. Cover, etc., getting to the target and making it difficult for them to move. It goes on and on how effective this can be. Now, at 5th level, of course, we get 3rd level spells, and the big granddaddy spell we're, of course, going to take is Hypnotic Pattern. We're also going to trade 1 spell out and take Leomund's Tiny Hut because it is a ritual, so we'll have Comprehend Languages as a ritual, which is very useful, and we'll have Leomund's Tiny Hut, which is an amazing ritual. But Hypnotic Pattern, obviously, is one of the best control spells in the game, and it's going to serve us very, very well, and it's going to be your big go-to spell. But arguably, even more important than that, we get Font of Inspiration. So when we take a short rest, we get our Bardic Inspiration dice back. So now, with a 20 charisma, we have a 5 modifier, meaning we can affect 5 possible targets, and we're getting 5 uses a day and 5 more at a short rest. That means 10 a day. 10 rounds, 12 rounds of combat in a day on average, by my estimation, means almost every single round in combat you can be using Bardic Inspiration. Now, that does not mean that it's going to always work out that way, because you only get 5 at a short rest. So if you had to do 2 combats before you got to a short rest, and that's very common, then you've got 5 to deal with 2 combats. So that would be 5 for 8 rounds. And then if you had another one after the short rest, then you've got 5 for 4 rounds. So obviously you can only use 1 a round. So one of those is actually probably going to be wasted at the end of the day. But even in that situation, we're talking about 9 practical uses of the Bardic Inspiration out of 12 average rounds of combat in a day. Think that through, and that's insanely powerful. Now, I'm going to quote a number to you in terms of temporary hit points that's going to quote 10, because you could still use that other Bardic Inspiration, and there is no rule saying that you're going to have only 3 combats in a day, obviously. So you do get 10, but I think practically speaking, because of the way it's going to lay out, you're probably only going to get the practical use of 9 out of the 10. Now, also at 5th level, if it wasn't bad enough, the temporary hit points now jump to 8. So the amount of the amount of shift that changes, you now have 10 uses of Bardic Inspiration. You can affect another party member, and the amount of temporary hit points jump from 5 to 8. And the end result of all this is that in a party where you can affect 5 targets, you will be handing out, if you hand them all out, potentially, again, because temporary hit points don't stack, you could potentially be handing out 400 temporary hit points in a day at level 5. If it helps, think of it as handing an individual character 80 temporary hit points throughout the course of a day. Again, that's potential temporary hit points, but you get the picture. This is a staggering defensive advantage. It's borderline as good as the Twilight Cleric, and in some respects, it's way better than the Twilight Cleric because of the reaction movement. I'm just simply talking about the effect of the bubble with the Twilight Cleric. The Twilight Cleric gets a whole host of other advantages. But in terms of comparing this mechanic to that, this is actually better than that one in that respect. And going on to 6th level, we now get Mantle of Majesty. So that's a bonus action to activate. It lasts for a minute, and you take on this aspect of unearthly beauty or fearful terror. It is the effect that I was speaking about when I was comparing the Lady of Lothlorien. That's how I imagine it anyway. And it makes people want to serve you. So you can now, as part of that bonus action, and then throughout the rest of that minute, you can cast Command without expending a spell slot. If the target was previously charmed by you, they automatically fail the save of the command. Now, this is an amazing ability in the sense that you are every time that command is successful on an opponent, you can easily pick a command like Grovel or Flee that will essentially take them out of the combat for that round. So you're trading your bonus action for their action, their turn, for your bonus action. They have to fail their save, of course. But the trick here for this ability is that it does run on concentration, which means that you're not going to be able to cast another concentration spell while this is up. So it's a great ability to have if you, let's say you were in a situation where you were out of Hypnotic Pattern. This is a great backup to that. Or in a combat where you didn't want to use Hypnotic Pattern, but would like to do something else. This is that great, if not this, then this kind of an ability. You only get this once per long rest, so it is exactly like I said. It is one of those things that when the right situation comes up, go ahead and use it. Why not? It's an extremely effective ability. And at 7th level, we get our first 4th level spell. We're going to take Polymorph, which is another one of these situations where it can be a potentially encounter-ending power, the spell, I should say. And then, of course, we'll trade out to get Dimension Door. But remember, at 7th level, we only get the one 4th level spell slot. At 8th level, we get our ASI, and I have us taking Alert. Now, it should be noted that I don't have us taking anything for concentration up until this point. But as I said, I think the combination of the use of the Bardic Inspiration and the control spell itself will be enough that you don't need to. And like I said, you're not a damage dealer. Don't worry about damage. If it is a big problem, it's probably of better value for you to take the dodge action than to take a feat. But I will list it as a possibility at level 12. At 9th level, we get our 5th level spells. And now, and of course, we only get the one. And we're going to take Synaptic Static. Now, we're taking Synaptic Static as a damage spell. You may only want to keep it for this particular level because our 5th level spell of choice coming up is going to be coming up at level 10. But Synaptic Static does have a nice combination effect for the Mantle of Majesty. So if you were to cast Synaptic Static, whoever fails that, is their saving throws are debuffed. Whoever failed their save is more likely to fail further saves, which will make them vulnerable to your command from Mantle of Majesty. So it's a way in a combat to contribute damage and be able to shut down one character that already failed a saving throw. But as I said, the better use for that 5th level spell slot is going to be coming up at level 10. So for now, as a 9th level placeholder, it's a fun thing to use. You may as well have fun using it. Our Song of Rest now goes up to a D8. That's how much damage is this party really going to be taking? Not very much, but whatever damage they do take, you're going to heal it very, very easily, obviously. We also, our proficiency bonus goes up to +4, which means our Jack of all trades is now at +2, which means we're getting, instead of +1 to initiative, we're now getting +2 from that. With alert, that's +7. With +2 from dexterity, that's a +9 to initiative. At 10th level, our Bardic Inspiration die goes up to a D10, but that doesn't really matter for us. We also get expertise and 2 more skills. That's really always useful. So this character, I didn't really talk about expertise before, but if you think about how this character plays, this is really true of all bards, but this character is a very effective healer, protector, that kind of thing, controller, and you could be rogue-ish. It just depends on what you want to put those expertise in. Regardless, having expertise in 4 skills at this is always going to be useful. But of course, the big titanic get is we get Magical Secrets. Magical Secrets allows us to take 2 picks, pick 2 spells from any spell list. The first one we're going to take, of course, is Wall of Force. Wall of Force is going to be a encounter-ending spell for us. And once a caster gets Wall of Force, the game starts becoming somewhat trivialized in some respects because you can neutralize threats without a saving throw. You can divide and conquer with large groups of enemies. There's not anything that they can really do about it. There's a little bit, but it's very difficult. It's not consistently reliable for the enemy to be able to do anything about it. And of course, now your Bardic Inspiration is going to get even better, as we'll see. And between all the effects of this and having Hypnotic Pattern and all that, you are effectively controlling the field as well as a wizard could. You're getting Wall of Force a level later than they would. But they don't have that Bardic Inspiration, and they don't have the Glamour Bard's Bardic Inspiration. Our temporary hit points that we are giving out per use of Bardic Inspiration is now 11 to a party member. That means if we use all 10 on a party of 5, we are handing out potentially 550 temporary hit points. That's 110 per party member, potential temporary hit points a day. The party, you're not going to lose. You're not going to lose if you are a Glamour Bard. If a party has a Glamour Bard and a Paladin to cover saving throws, things are pretty much over. And at 11th level, we get our first 6th level spell, and we get Mass Suggestion, which is one of the best spells off the Wizard's spell list anyway. Again, great control spell, very thematic for a Bard, which is of course why it's on the Bard spell list. But just control. Now, the one thing it should be noted here that you're not going to be doing nearly as well as the Wizard can do is the Wizard is going to be the better utility caster than you. I'm talking about as good as the Wizard as a controller in combat situations, but you can do other things that the Wizard can't do outside of combat for utility purposes. You're a charisma character, and expertise in 4 skills now. So it's a give and trade. But in combat, you are as effective or more effective in combat as a controller than a wizard could hope to be. And at 12th level, we get our ASI. So here you either go with a +2 dexterity. That's a pretty vanilla pick, of course, or you could take something like Warcaster or Resilient. The addition for the Constitution for Resilient would be somewhat wasted, but you're really here for the proficiency in the save. I don't think you're going to get a lot of the other effects that you would want out of Warcaster, so you're really taking it if you want to be protecting those concentration saves. But I would probably, in a general sense, in a theoretical sense, I would just go ahead and take the +2 dex here. That's going to help out my initiative even more, my armor class, so it's going to affect me not even having to worry about making concentration saves even more reliable, and I'm going to be sitting back and dodging and whatever, staying out of combat long enough that I'm not really too worried about concentration saves. And at 13th level, we get our 7th level spells, and of course we go Force Cage. And the Song of Rest now goes up to a D10. And at level 14, we get Magical Secrets. So we get 2 more picks. And of course, the one I'm going to take is Simulacrum. And I've done a video on Simulacrum. The link will be in the description. But needless to say, Simulacrum is an insanely powerful spell. Now, I want you to stop and think about this for just 1 second with Simulacrum. It gets the Bardic Inspiration too. And it gets its own bonus action. Now, the party only gets 1 reaction. And temporary hit points don't stack. So there is kind of you wouldn't necessarily want them to always be using it the same rounds, but what that does mean is that not only could one of you or the Simulacrum, if you brought the Simulacrum with you in combat, could you be doing all the battlefield movement and temporary hit points, but the other one could be handing out just standard Bard inspiration dice on top of all that, on top of your spells, but they don't recover the spells, but they would recover Bardic inspiration dice. But so needless to say, Simulacrum is an insanely powerful spell, and another great spell choice would be Contingency. So I would have to say Simulacrum and Contingency would be. Contingency is just one of those spells. It's one of those juicy wizard spells. Simulacrum goes without saying. And we get our final college feature, which is Unbreakable Majesty. So you use a bonus action again. Those are going to get very dicey. But you get a bonus action for 1 minute. Any creature that tries to attack you for the first time must make a charisma saving throw, or if it fails, they cannot attack you and must attack something else. If it does make it save, it can now attack you, but any spell that you may cast on it, and only spells, it will have disadvantage on those saving throws. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast Bless on all of you.